48-hour art check, round 56. Right, we are back.
Right.
Josh has risen from the grave.
I know. So I guess briefly, just catching people up. So it's been a bit of time since we've done an official art check. The last one we did, if you guys are noticing a missing number, we both have playlists of the 48-hour art check, but just look at the one before, and it's the Art Casters episode where we had Cory on, and actually it was a lot of fun. We talked high versus low art, got a little highfalutin, but it was fun.
Oh, I hate that topic so much.
Oh yeah, I don't want to hit it again. But anyhow, so before that, I was just super sick for days on end, and all I was able to do, was watch really bad Shaolin kung fu flicks, which was actually a lot of fun. But other than that, I literally I'd try to draw, and it was just a smudge of blur because my head was just all clouded and stuff. So yeah. I got antibiotics, and I'm kind of I feel like I'm at 80%, which talking before this, we'll get into that with struggles and stuff, but yeah, 80% is not 100%, and I hate that.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm glad we're back on the horse. We're gonna do a tight 15 this time. So
all right.
Let's. Do you want to jump in? You can start.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So there's a little delay on the timer, so I'm just gonna guess where it's at this point. But so what I got accomplished was I did roughs or thumbnails for my page. The next page, I did on the right of that, you're going to see rough panel borders and lettering. And then I also did a filler Sunday comic strip, which I haven't done in a while, but I also managed to knock that out today. And that'll be up on quarterlystories.com probably right after this show. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I like that comic strip. I filled in more characters on this, and I lost a ton of time with a bunch of stuff, and but I have 20 of the 31 that I need in there, and so my goal, I'll talk about later, but I've got most of them in, so I'm 2/3 of the way there, but I'll get all the way there by Monday so that I can start inking them. So, but it's looking good. I like where it's at. It's kind of my first crowd scene, so it's good.
Nice.
How about challenges?
Challenges mentioned before, it's just basically the same thing. I was sick, and I really, I try to accept my limitations as being a human being, but it really is irritating, especially now that I'm feeling a little better, but I'm just my brain's not on it like it usually is, and
right.
That just little lag, it's like having a little pinwheel of death just spin every once in a while where you're like, oh, come on, my computer usually runs pretty well,
Yeah. For me, I've just been working super early to kind of late, not super late, but super early to kind of late all week. And several times, like last night, I sat down on the couch after dinner and accidentally fell asleep. I woke up at 4 in the morning, so I slept from 8 to 4. It's just been weird schedules and times, so that's been mainly the problem.
Got it. So my plans for this next time are basically just to hopefully rough out at least 2 panels of my comic, get that Sunday comic strip, filler strip posted up on quarterlystories.com, and also do my son's birthday party, which is on Saturday. So he turned 5 on Wednesday. So,
that's cool. Yeah. So I kind of alluded to this already. Mine is I am going to try to tomorrow. I'm just going to marathon it. I'm going to try to rough in all the pencils for 11 more characters. And a lot of them are kind of small. I'm going to do Pikachu as Dr. Manhattan, do a Smurf or 2 in there, because I've got to fill in some of the smaller spots. So that's kind of my plans. But I'll have 30 characters done by the time we meet again on Monday. So
sweet.
Okay, so we have a topic from one of our friends of the show that has commented before. Do you want to kick that off?
Yeah. So Marshall Couture, who you guys can find at donkeyjockprojects.com, and you guys should all subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's a good guy. He's part of the hundreds community, and he's just, pretty. He's really good at asking questions. This is all from one comment on our videos. But he was asking what the first time we fell in love with comics was like. Like, so what was the first time we, read a comic and we just fell in love with comics? And do you want to kind of kick it off? Before we kick it off, though, I do want to say those roughs that you're doing look awesome.
Thanks.
And I know when you're working on a crowd scene like that, it can be kind of frustrating because it takes time. but all of that structural work that you're putting in now, it's going to make that final execution so much quicker. And it looks awesome. So I'm excited to see that.
I'm hoping so, because I'm going to do tight pencils and inks, one character per day. So I'm hoping that they're a little bit tighter roughs than I normally do. So because I kind of have to if I'm going to hit 30 in a row, and I'll be traveling in the middle of it. So
wow.
But yeah. So anyway.
All right. So first time you fell in love with comics, you want to tee it off? Or,
sure. I don't know that I can remember my first comic. We were not well off growing up. I don't think we were poor by any means, but we lived in California. My dad was the only income earner in the home and taught high school wood shop, and so we never had like a ton of money, and I never really had any money, and so I can't even remember when I bought my first comic, but they were kind of few and far between until I kind of got into high school. But I remember growing up on the X-Men cartoon, and when I was super little, I would run around the house in my underwear, and I would ball up a white blanket in my arm and pretend like it was a web and shoot it out of my arm with my elbow, kind of popping it. And so I know I was into the cartoons before I got into the comics, but the earliest memories that I have is I had a buddy who really got into Image, and kind of everybody I knew bought Spawn #1, like it wasn't that big of a deal. And I didn't know that there was this big revolution happening or whatever. It was just like comics were comics. I didn't know that there was this, there was no real internet or whatever. So anything that anybody knew was rumor or printed in the backs. But he got into Spawn. I read Spawn a little bit. That was cool. And I think just prior to that, and I mentioned this in the last time, I came across like Deadpool #1, and it was the first miniseries that he had, and it was amazing, and I loved it. And I remember it was so funny. And I had read some X-Men stuff before. And I'd read some Spider-Man before, and I think as an angsty teenager, Spider-Man's fun now, but I don't enjoy Spider-Man like I did when I was like 13, 14. I think his outlook on life really connected with me as a, as kind of an early teen, just, because he's just downtrodden and nobody takes him seriously and he can't win, but he's like super powerful. And anyway, it was kind of that. So it's kind of all mixed into one. But then when I came across, and I also liked that he was kind of sarcastic, but then I came across Spawn and Deadpool, and they were like sardonic almost, like in their humor was darker. I remember several times I was like, oh man, that's rough. And so I got all my friends into Deadpool, and then we all anyway. But it was kind of few and far between. And so I don't know that I could really pin down any particular first comic, but I know it revolved a lot around Marvel, and as I started reading that miniseries, there's a bunch of like people that are like no one remembers. Mr. Tolliver was in there, and we were all trying to figure out who he was, and it was this big secret, thing. And then you had like Black Cassidy, who like nobody ever heard. He's like a pirate has this disease where he's mostly made out of wood or something. And there's all these like kind of no-name characters that Liefeld was allowed to play with, and I still remember even back then, even though I didn't know what I was doing, that me and my cousins were like, "What's up with everybody's feet?" Because there'd be like, there was one of the second or third book in the miniseries, like this chick had a leg that was like 20 feet long because it was going behind several characters as they were all jumping, and we were like, what is this? Anyway, but the storytelling was fun, and it was really awesome. So I think that's probably around the time that I fell in love with it. And it has a lot to do with Spawn and Deadpool, but I can't pinpoint a specific comic.
Nice. Okay, so I have some kind of like 3 separate points that all kind of led to the moment that I kind of fell in love with comics. But it's like, so when I was a kid, I had 2 older sisters and then 2 older brothers, but they were so much older that by the time I was a kid, like they were pretty much out of the house, like doing, pursuing jobs and stuff like that. So, like being the youngest, I remember like there were these like hand-me-down stack of comics that had just been like left, and a bunch of them were like old, like classic, like Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse comics and stuff. Yeah. And then there were the original Star Wars comics, like the Marvel Star Wars comics, just in a stack, like treated really crappily, like the covers all bent and torn up because they've been read a million times. And I remember kind of perusing through them and really enjoying them, but like kind of forgetting about them and forgetting about comics for a while. But like my mom was an English teacher, my dad was a graphic designer, so I was like, and I was a nerdy kid, like, and I was really into reading. So by the time I was like in, like 4th grade, I was reading like novels, like not kids' books and stuff like that. Like I had gotten really into Roald Dahl, like, so I read everything by Roald Dahl, and then I started reading his adult stuff, which one thing I really appreciate about my family is they never like were like, those are pretty heavy books. They're for adults, you know. But I never really remember any moment where like, because I think both of my parents were like appreciative of books, I never had a moment where they were like, oh, you can't read that, Yeah. They'd kind of let me sort of grow in my own reading journey and stuff, and I really appreciate that. But anyhow, so keep in mind, like, so my dad's kind of got this whole art background, and he's bringing aesthetics in, and we're like driving on the freeway, and he'll get mad at a sign on the road because it has crappy kerning. And then my mom is like, like I'm at home and I'm like, hey, can I go to the bathroom? And she's like, may you go to the bathroom? You know what I mean? Like, This is the family I grew up with, like people who love language and love art. So, so then like I remember watching this old black and white film with my family, and I can't remember per se, but I think it was called like How to Murder Your Wife or something. It's a comedy. And the character in it was a cartoonist, like a Sunday strip artist. Yeah. And at that time, I got really into Malia Kerr. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Wow, that was weird. So, but at that time, I got really into like Calvin and Hobbes, and was like buying, like whenever we get that Scholastic order sheet. Because like you were saying, there was no internet at this time. So like that was your access to books. You get the Scholastic thing at school. And my family was pretty poor too, but we were able to like my parents would always kind of scrounge for books. Yeah. And so, I'd get these books as like a cheat. Anyhow, so that was kind of my way into comics, but I hadn't really fallen in love with comics. And I remember really vividly, I think it was like 3rd or 4th grade, going to a library to check out some books, and they had this free giveaway called Spider-Man Adventures in Reading. That was just a free, crappy kind of one-off comic trying to get kids into reading. by like hooking them in with a comic. And that was the first moment where I like looked through it, and I think I had gotten old enough to go like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do, because it's art and it's literature and it's merged and it's fluid and it kind of works. And I remember at the time I didn't really buy the story, but I just fell in love with comics from it, because it was like, if you did this and the story were better, you know, this could be great. And anyhow, so that's pretty much when I fell in love with comics. And then from there, you know, got hooked and started buying like Web of Spider-Man, which was my first series. And I really got addicted, and kind of, there was no turning back at that point. So yeah, that's the first time I fell in love with comics. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right.
All right. I just remembered several others that I won't talk about, but Michael Turner and Top Cow, that I remember the whole Aspen thing. That was like, oh, wow, that was amazing. Anyway, so I think I inadvertently got into indie stuff without knowing it was indie.
No. And what's interesting is I relate a lot to what you're describing too, because when I got to the point of actually like biking to the comic shops, like we talked about last week, you know, and like I used to volunteer to like stock the back issues just to get a free comic. So I do, because like we weren't super well off, but it was a good way to get a comic, you know. So I'd work there for like an hour and get like a comic book. But
that's so awesome.
It was awesome.
They get an hour's work by paying you like 75 cents worth of paper for them.
Yeah. And all of it under the table. But the cool thing was, I did get like that my jam at that time was totally Image. Like I was way into the Image. Spawn was my favorite of the whole series and stuff. And then Spawn led me to check out Cerebrus, because Cerebrus had a guest spot. So like there's all sorts of that kind of stuff we could get into with like rabbit holes and stuff. But it's like when you mentioned the Image thing kind of connecting with you, I was that kid getting all my friends into Image, you know. And I was the guy who was like, dude, you guys have to read the Max. And they're like, the Max? Because this was like pre-MTV. Anyhow.
And that's where I caught the Max, was on MTV.
Yeah. Dude, I was such a nerd for the Max that I'm actually in a couple of the issues in the letters section.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
And I still have a good friend to this day that I met who was a pen pal from, like, pen pal, like written pen pal. That's dating how old I am. And we used to send each other mixtapes. Like, so she got me into like I got her into kind of like hardcore punk rock, and she got me into ska, like weirdly enough, like third wave ska. So anyhow, we should bring that up next time. Let's next 48-hour art check. Maybe we should just talk Image.
Oh, Image, sure. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I mean, there's so much stuff at that time.
Yeah. It was really, that was an interesting time for Image. Yeah, it was good.
So before we read this out too, just for those of you following along, let us know what your first time you fell in love with comics was in the chats, and then we'll log out. But I am curious to hear everybody's story on that. Yeah,
and whether it be first issues or whether it be like kind of coming in through other aspects, because now that I'm talking about it, I'm realizing there's some other things. So anything that kind of led you to it, we're super curious to hear about that. If you want to check out my stuff, you can go to kuretake.com, and if you want to follow along to what I'll be doing in Inktober, I will be inking one character a day and doing nonsensical mashups. And so that should be fun. So follow along on Twitter and Instagram, and I will try, though I'm not committing to, do a video a day on YouTube for that as well. So we'll see how that goes. If you want to check out Josh's stuff, then go to quarterlystories.com, and you'll see the comic strip that he's done, as well as the pages that have led up to this. And special thanks to No Saboteurs for licensing the intro music, and you can check them out at facebook.com/NoSaboteurs. So let us know about your experiences in the comments, and we'll see you on Monday.